Good. I started the recording, but I can
Sure.
chop it and start it whenever. How's it going,
Yeah.
Doc? Good.
I'm doing all right, man. Yeah. This
Awesome.
worked out. This worked out real well.
Yeah, it was perfect. I was supposed to have a partner in this that is studying to become a trainer, and he has all the questions that are from the perspective of somebody that has never trained a client before,
Hmm.
but they've trained themselves.
Yeah.
So I'll try to put together as much as I can within the ways that I'm going to ask it. But I prepared not only a bunch of questions from IG that I got from Gen Pop and from some
Yeah.
athletes, but also some of the things that I'm needing to understand. So, first of all, thank you for being here. Good morning. Um, if you're listening and you can't see it, this is Dr. Pat Davidson. He wrote a book on rethinking the big patterns. Tell us more about like a little bit about yourself. I don't want to take too much of time
Yeah.
doing that, but just so people know.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Pat Davidson. I have a PhD in exercise physiology, a master's degree in strength and conditioning. I've uh, I've worked as a professor of exercise science at a couple of different schools. I've worked in Manhattan for the last 7 years doing personal training for general population clients mainly. There's not a lot of athletes around in New York City. It's mostly just rich people, either like CEOs or celebrities or something. You know what I mean? And I've got a background competing in sports that goes way back. I'm 42 years old now. I played baseball and football in high school, and then I got into mixed martial arts after that in the late 90s, early 2000s. I did a lot of competing in the jujitsu and submission wrestling world, and I did a couple of professional MMA fights. Then I got into grad school and started to really just focus on education. When I finished my PhD, I actually started to compete in strongman as well, and I competed for a couple national championships and world championships. I finished top 10 in the U.S. twice and top 10 in the world once in the 175-pound class. So I've tried to I've really had a pretty decent blend of like the education theoretical side of things, along with actually competing and trying to be in the trenches and working. Like I mean, I just love to train. Like I grew up, uh, like as a kid, sort of in that late '80s, early '90s time period, and even back then in my younger years, like I always loved fitness stuff. They used to have all the ESPN fitness shows on, the bodybuilding shows, the aerobic shows. I was probably watching it more for the girls than anything, but it was like all that info kind of sunk into my head even back then. And I started working out when I was like 14 in 1994, and saving up and building a little home gym in my basement. Just it's been a way of life for me for a long time. It's crazy. I remember teaching a seminar recently and being like, yeah, I started lifting weights in 1994, and that's longer than a lot of the people that were at the seminar had been alive. And
Yeah.
it was like, damn, like this, it's been going on for a long time, man. Like this isn't just like an overnight kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's been my thing. It's like not only understanding the knowledge, but the practicality of everything. You can also look at some of the information that's given to you from a theoretical point of view and just pass that on and be like, well, someone else is gonna need this, but I already got the practice and past that point, I'm not gonna need it. But like that's kind of where my questions start to happen. And I want to get into it real quick because there's a lot of things that I want to ask you. And if
Yeah.
you don't know about Dr. Pat Davidson, there's a lot of information out there, videos and other podcasts that talk even more deeper into how he got to where he is now and the kind of things that he's putting out. Let's get started, Pat. I want to ask you my first thing because this is practical help for the people that don't understand it. So think and imagine you're talking to Gen Pop, but you're also talking to new trainers that are coming in. That's the kind
Yeah.
of population that I have. The first big question that I have is what is stretching to you? What is fascicle lengthening to you? How do you approach the static stretching or just stretching in general that is out there in the before you work out you have to stretch idea, or after you work out you have to stretch idea? How do you see stretching in itself?
I think that if like from a performance or a change perspective, it's a waste of time. But I think that that doesn't mean it's completely useless. Where I see the value of it, I think that people need a movement practice in their life that is not necessarily goal related, just moving for the sake of moving and feeling your body. And if stretching is an avenue into that, then I think that's great. You know, overall, like I've got a 1.5-year-old son, and he never stops moving. And he doesn't have any specific goals other than like he wants to do something or like, but literally this dude never stops, moving ever. It's crazy, but he just enjoys feeling the way his body moves through space, and he does random things with it. And then as adults, we just literally sit and do nothing for big chunks of the day. So getting down on the ground, being able to feel the ground, rolling your body around on the ground, you know, just allowing your body, like stretching is great from a relaxation standpoint. It's great from a mind body standpoint. It's great from trying to like link some breathing with it. I think that everybody in this day and age, like probably anxiety and mental health stuff is at an all-time high in terms of problems.
Right.
So the more that you can be in your body, the more that you can breathe, the more that you can feel your body, the better. And so I see a tremendous amount of value stretching and taking time to just feel the way your body responds to different positions and relative to gravity and interacting with the ground and other surfaces. That is all good, and it's amazing for people. But if you think it's going to really change your physical capabilities or how much you move or any of the, it's not like it's not going to do the things that a lot of people think it's going to do for them, but it'll do a lot of things that are really helpful that people never think about.
So you think like when I go to some of these gyms, I'll see people like grabbing a band and stretching their lats for their overhead. Like let's say, you know, like I'll walk into a CrossFit gym and they want to do their overhead snatches. Or it's hard for them to squat in that overhead position. I understand it from the levers. I understand it from rethinking the big patterns. But what are they really doing when you see somebody stretching their lats? Where do you think that helps them? Or
it's like they're trying to put out a 5-alarm fire with a water gun.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not. It's a weak tool for a gigantic job. It's not going to do anything.
So it wouldn't lengthen the fascicles in themselves inside the muscle. You think that what they're really feeling would be more of the sensory input from the fascia?
It's just neurological. It's like, you know, you get you can get parts of the nervous system to decrease tone for a very small amount of time in terms of the nerves that actually speak to muscles, like the underlying resting level of tension that the muscle operates under at like in background baseline conditions. You can decrease that ever so slightly, but it's doing almost nothing.
Okay. And then if you had the opportunity, let's say you had yourself a seminar and it's a CrossFit style seminar and people want to do that, like what would be a better option that you would think if they had to do overhead movements? What I mean, I know everybody's different, they have individualities, but what do you think would be a better option for them?
Look, like to me, it all comes down to the relative position of your pelvis with your thorax, with your skull. Okay. So those are the big structures that make up your body. I think of like your arms and your legs aren't really your body. Your skull, your thorax, and your pelvis are your body. And the way that those things are positioned relative to each other determines how easy it is for your arms and legs to swing and move through space. So if people want to think about it like a door and a door frame, your arms and your legs are like the door and the hinges of the door. And then the skull, the thorax, and the pelvis are like the frame. And it's the position of the frame that determines how easy it is for the door to swing through space. So a lot of times just the alignment or the relative like way that those body structures are with each other, it almost would create a situation where the frame would be crooked and then the door doesn't swing very well. And so I always attack it by having people do core exercises for their pelvis and their thorax. And I usually, generally, the big problems are that things go too far forward. You know, it's almost like your ribs are blowing too far forward,
Right.
your pelvis is leaking forward. And I'm trying to recruit muscles that pull those structures back. And if I can keep your ribs back and your pelvis back, it kind of keeps your whole center of mass back. So, you know, people are usually falling too far forward. It's like their weight ends up on their toes. Everything is just like, it's almost like if you were to watch people in like a space movie, like astronauts, when the gravity goes to zero, it's like they all just like, boo, they kind of, they fly up, forward, and away. That's just like the nature. And that shows you where people's center of mass is going. You never see a space movie and they fall down, back, and the other way. It's always up, forward, and away. So that's just where they would be going under all circumstances. You know, so I'm trying to do the opposite with people, generally speaking. Like, I'll take a look at what your tendency is, and then I'm going to make you do the opposite to reposition you. And then, you know, I just do it enough where, you know, I measure people's range of motion with their arms and their legs, and I get a general sense of what's going on with their body. I do techniques that change the position of their body, and then I remeasure their arms and their legs, and I see that those measurements change for the positive. And that's usually my working methodology.
Okay. And then how would you see it as far as if you had to do a big, like let's say a warm up, right?
Yep.
So let's say that we take out stretching and they're starting to move. What would be the next best thing that you think that most people need? Because I know that, for example, in Athletic Weapon, which by the way, if you haven't checked out Athletic Weapon, you have to check out Athletic Weapon. It's amazing. One of the things that I learned was the ballistic movement of the medicine balls when we first started were amazing to be able to get a great warm up.
Yeah.
How would that be different than stretching? How would ballistic med ball throws for you? How would you apply that to what we just spoke about? So instead of stretching, what would we do to warm up better?
Look, like the best way to warm up is just to practice the thing that you're going to do. Just start slower and build up an intensity with whatever it is that you're going to do. You know, stretching is like, it's the benefits of warm up is that it actually heats up your body. And when you heat up a body, like, you know, you change the viscosity of the fluids inside the joint capsules, which makes your joints move more freely and easily. It would be like, you know, literally changing your motor oil in your car and allowing it to move with like less friction and more ease of movement. So, and then like, if you literally just practice the things that you're about to do, you're going to get that motor pattern, you know, just like fired up in your own, you know, with your system. Like you're going to start utilizing the same muscles, the same nerves that you're going to use. Just build up appropriately. You know what I mean?
How would you like when somebody comes in and they'll usually tell me like, hey, I feel tight, or I have like a knot.
Yeah.
How do you respond to those things when it comes to like yeah, we can go through the movements, but if they're going through the movements and they're not feeling like they can get in the right positions, how would you approach that part?
You know, I think that like I use core exercises to change range of motion. Like, to me, the purpose of I don't like a lot. I think a lot of people do core exercises because they think it's going to make their abs look better or something like that.
Right.
You know, I use core exercises where it's generally ground based and you are demonstrating control over your body and you're utilizing breathing principles. I design those things for a person to change their range of motion. Plain and simple. That's the point of them for me. And when they're done right, when the right exercise is chosen and it's performed properly, you'll generally see range of motion change significantly. And oftentimes, if people have complaints about things, those complaints go away. Then I just transition them into fitness exercises. And fitness exercises are everything else: running, jumping, throwing, changing direction, and lifting weights. And if we're going to do those things, we're just going to warm up by doing those things at a lower intensity and build up. It's kind of like, hey, what's the best way to warm up for a squat? We'll squat lighter and do a couple warm-up sets. Right. And then add weight as you go. Like, that's the most specific way to warm up the squat. Like, is jumping jacks aren't going to warm you up for a squat. They'll warm you up for more jumping jacks. And like, there's a general warm up and then there's a specific warm up. If you get into any just textbook on, training for anything really, like a general warm up is just anything that heats up your body. And a specific warm up is practicing the movements that you're going to train. And you just do warm up sets, literally.
So that would be like, to tie it all in would be, if I just change the temperature of my body in the movement patterns that I need to go to, then that will allow me to have more viscosity, like more of a gelatin movement within the joints. And then the muscle fascicles will lengthen more, essentially giving me more length if I do my core exercises. But then
it's probably not changing. It's probably not changing the muscle fascicles or anything like that. Like, that's just something that doesn't really change. Okay. To any real appreciable degree, unless you hold a stretch for more than 20 minutes straight. You're just. It's almost like I would just take the structure of your pelvis and then just pull it back under you. And now that changes the relationship of all the things relative to each other. You know what I mean? That's what I would do with a core exercise. Like, I'm going to really work on having somebody find their hamstrings, because it's going to, like, my biceps attached to my forearm bones. And when I recruit my biceps, it moves my forearm bones through space like that. Okay. Right. That's an easy one to see because it's just my muscles on my arms. The hamstrings attach to the front of the shins, and they also attach to the back side of the pelvis. And when they work on the pelvis, they pull the back side of the pelvis down. Okay. If I can get my hamstrings to be recruited and to just ramp them up in activity, they're going to hold the pelvis in place. It's like, to me, an easy way to think about the way the hamstrings are relative to the pelvis. The pelvis tends to be like a horse that wants to run forward. And the hamstrings are like the reins of the horse that the rider would hold, that would pull the horse back. And they're not going to let the horse run forward. Most of the time, what I'm thinking of when I'm doing a core exercise for the pelvis for somebody is, hey, I'm just taking the reins of the horse and I'm pulling the horse back, and I'm putting it into a more of a relaxed resting position. Right. I'm going to just take this angry beast and I'm going to bring it back a little bit. And now that it's there, the whole system has a chance to be a little bit more at ease, rather than falling forward, racing forward. And then everything, if you fall forward just as a person, like, you're going to do everything you possibly can to try to prevent yourself from falling on your face. Your toes are going to grip into the ground. You'll recruit the big back muscles that are in between your ribs and in between your spinal segments. You'll grip with your hands. Your calves will turn on to try to prevent you from falling. And the more that your center of mass is forward and you're falling forward, the more you're going to rely on all these strategies to really hold on for dear life. And all of those strategies are basically they're just going to lock you down from your ability to move through space easily. So the minute that I just take something and I pull you back, it lets all those other things relax. It's almost like they were doing 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and no one's happy if they're working 2 or 3 jobs. It's like, so if I just take away a couple of those extra jobs, like, your calves are supposed to just, flex your ankle to let you come up on your toes. You shouldn't need them to prevent you from falling on your face. But if they're working as, ankle flexors and as falling on your face preventers, now all of a sudden they're going to make you tighter. If your lower back muscles are doing the same thing and working 2, 3 jobs, they're just going to make you tighter. They're going to take away your options from you, because the more that you're in a bad position, the more options get taken away from you in general, in life or any other circumstance. You'll just take away all your opportunities and all your chances. And if you just put yourself in an easier position that you can operate from, your options will come back, and that's really all this is as well. It's a very similar kind of a thing.
Yeah, like
And
the door frame that you talked about. So if the door is, scratching against the floor or
yeah,
it's not closing correctly, those are the, I feel tight or I have this knot thing. If I just fix
yeah,
the door frame, we go back to moving in and out, no problem, right?
that's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
perfect. Because a
yeah,
lot
it's
of
like
people waste. Go ahead, go ahead.
if the whole frame is tipped forward,
Right.
then the door you go to open it bangs into the ground right away. So how about I just take the frame and I pull it back a little bit, you
Mhm.
know? And now that I've done that, oh, look, the door just works. I didn't need WD-40. I didn't need to stretch the door. I didn't need the surgeon to shave the door down. None of those things were really that essential. It just needed to reorient the position of the frame.
Right, but a lot of people come around and have all these tools and
Yep.
ways to do it, and then they'll bring in a special door stretcher, and then they'll bring in
Yep.
a special door breaker, and all these things that they kind of just for the gem pop, like it's confusing, and it gets confusing to the point where everybody says the same thing, whether pros or gem pop. They go, there's so much information out there. I don't know how to pick or what to pick. You know?
Yeah. So you ever you ever take a dog and put that dog in a room it doesn't want to be in?
Yeah, my dog is outside this room, and it's it's
So
there.
when you take a dog and you got company and the dog's being a jerk and you throw it in another room and it doesn't want to be in there, what does the dog do once it's in this room it doesn't want to be in?
Scratching the door.
Yep, they'll scratch, they'll bark, they'll tear things up. Does
Yeah.
that ever work? Does that ever work to let the dog out of the room?
No.
You've never opened the door for the dog?
I mean, I would have to at some point if it's like destroying my door.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
That it actually works if you think about it. Okay, when the
Yeah.
dog scratches and barks and howls and rips things up in the room, that door is going to open at some point. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and here's the thing, it works, and the dog concludes that the mechanisms for opening doors is barking, scratching, and howling. Okay. And sometimes, here's the thing, like sometimes it happens pretty easily. Like I scratch for 2 minutes and the door just opens. Cool. Other times it's like, man, I got to really work hard today. I got to bark and I got to scratch, and maybe I got to do it louder and harder and for a longer period of time. It'll eventually work. Okay.
Right.
The interesting thing is like barking, scratching, and howling have nothing to do with locks, levers, knobs, and buttons. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so dogs have actually no idea what the actual functioning of doors is whatsoever. And to me, this is very similar to the way that most fitness professionals are as it pertains to range of motion. And it's kind of like, well, we just had to use these lacrosse balls and foam rollers, and we have to do this dynamic stretching and static stretching and this, that, and the other thing. And it's kind of like, well, it didn't work today, but just do it more next time.
Right.
And it's kind of like, well, if it works, when something works and really works based on the mechanisms of how it works immediately, it works demonstrably, and it works every time. And you never need to add more or do it harder or do any of these other things. You just walk up, you turn the knob, and you pull. That's
Right.
how it actually works. So I really think that as an industry, no one has any idea what the hell they're doing. It really is just a bunch of dogs that are trapped in rooms that are barking and scratching at doors that don't understand how knobs, levers, latches, and hinges actually function.
Right.
So, I do think that there are actual techniques that work, though. You know what I mean? Like every time I do an assessment and see what I'm working with and give the person the correct drill for them, it works.
Yeah.
It
I mean,
just works.
I seen it work like firsthand in our seminar, and just everything that you've been doing. The way that I approach it now is I got to make sure that you have the right things for the right job. So I'll take that same anecdote and metaphor would be the door. Some of the pro track athletes need a door that comes back real quick to its original position. And
Yeah.
then somebody that needs a half marathon would need a door to revolve, right? They don't need that stiffness for that long. They need to be able to just like basically hit the ground for so long that their connective tissue is just gonna be taken over by their musculature versus the track athlete. I need all connective tissue, right? How do you see, like, do you ever see like, well, not everybody needs a tight door versus not everybody needs a loose door? Do you ever see hinges like that?
Sure. I mean, like I've worked with plenty of really high level strength athletes for years, and I've been one. And you really don't want to be very flexible. You know what I mean? Like if you have a lot of range of motion, it's probably not, it probably means you're not good at the sport. You know, like I didn't see a single person that was good at strongman that had tremendous range of motion. Just like, okay, you're going to finish last probably. It's like you actually want to just be tight as a drum. And it's like, mainly because if you're trying to lift the heaviest possible things, and you're like, there's the lowering phase and there's the raising phase. And when your muscles lose their, like, it's almost like you want the muscle to be short and to stay short, even when you're lowering the thing. And the minute that it loses that kind of shortness is the minute that you're probably going to miss the lift, you know?
Mm.
So it's very similar with speed too. Like the slower you are, the more that your ankle, your knee, and your hip flex when you're in ground contact, you know? And it's kind of like, it's tricky. It's like, I don't want you to be tight for no reason. Like, I don't want you to just have very bad range of motion. It's more that during the task itself, I want there to be very minimal range of motion. And that occurs in large part, like, you know, I'm not sure that we have all of the answers at this point in time, but it's almost like a great athlete can selectively switch between the North Pole and the South Pole, depending upon needs. Okay. If
Right.
we're talking just full speed sprinting straight ahead, you don't need to have like a tremendous amount of range of motion.
Right.
You know, you really don't. It's not like you don't need to look like a ballet dancer or something like that. You need enough, you know what I mean? You need enough
Right.
range of motion so that you have a high heel recovery at top speed. You need enough range of motion so that you get hip separation while you're running. Like you need enough range of motion so you get really good arm swing.
Right.
But we're not talking about like things that are outside the norms for human beings, like
Right.
at all. But what really seems to matter quite a bit is that when you are in ground contact, that those muscles become very stiff and that they don't allow this enormous amount of deformation of the body structures during this impact phase of the running stride, you know?
Right.
And it's very clear research wise that like the less stiff the muscles are during ground contact, the more time the foot spends on the ground. The more time that the foot's on the ground, the less elastic return is coming through all the connective tissues. You know, the less time that you have elastic return, it means that you have to use more muscle to actually power yourself through space. The more time that you're using muscle, the more fatigued the muscles are going to become. So
Right.
it's like a very circular kind of a thought process of like, you know, your foot needs to try to hit the ground directly under your center of mass from a technique standpoint.
Right.
If it does that, then you're going to spend less time on the ground. If you spend less time on the ground, you get more elastic return. Okay. If your biomechanics in the running stride are good, then it means that your foot's going to hit directly under center of mass on every ground contact. Okay.
Right.
And like, that just means that you run well from a technique standpoint. But even if you compare people that run well from a technique standpoint, like let's just assume that they have good technique. Now it's going to come down to who's kind of got stiffer muscles at that point in time. because the less stiff that you are, the more that structures will deform. And the more that you're deforming, the more time that you're on the ground. It's almost like, I want to picture like a stone skipping on water. You know, if the stone, like, you're not going to be able to skip something that, like, a stone skips because of how stiff it is.
Right.
You know what I mean? If I was trying to skip a fruit roll up or something like that, it probably wouldn't work very well because it's going to deform. You know, like a gelatinous thing is going to deform on impact. I need it to be rigid, so it's like boom, boom, boom. There's that ability for it to just bounce quickly.
Yeah, depending on the forces too. Like in the hurdlers, I didn't have experience with hurdlers as far as power into the ground until like recently. And what happens is they don't jump over the hurdle; they step over it, and then when they hit the ground, their first leg is going to come down, touch the ground, and then their trail leg that's coming around has to force them back into the sprint. So their first leg touches the ground, keeps the hips away from the ground, and the second leg is the one that keeps running because they can't run on that first step from the bottom on that time away. And it's just like, I don't know about symmetry because, like, if I see them in the gym, they're not going to be symmetrical. Is that something that you see sometimes in sports that you say, well, this is how the connective tissue behaves, transfers over to the structure of the door. This door needs to be tilted. Is that something that you see as well?
Well, look, like I just look at it like this. I try to take as much theory out as I can when I'm training people, and I try for it to just be numbers related. Okay. So at a certain point, you have to look at like, hey, what's their best, actual competition time? What are their typical training times? Best training time, best competition time. And I want to make sure that when they're in training, that they're doing top speed work, that they're close to their best training times. And if their training times start to decrease, well, that's the biggest problem that you can possibly have. Okay. So I want to see that their training times are consistent or going in a positive direction. From there, if I'm in the weight room, I just want all the stuff that's done in the weight room to be done properly. You know what I mean? Right. And when I take a look at their table tests, I should have a pretty good profile of this person for range of motion. It's kind of like, I should have a good idea of how much, shoulder flexion do they normally have? How much internal rotation do they normally have? I'll take a look at all their arms and their leg measurements. And if I start to see any of these measurements going in a really odd direction for this person, because I should have a pretty good idea of like, when this person has ran their competition best time, here's where all their numbers were. Okay. Here's how much they were able to squat. Here's what their vertical jump was. Here's what their hip internal rotation was. Here's what, their 40-meter time was, their 60-meter time, their 120-meter time. All of these are just really big indicators of the likelihood that they're going to run their competition best. And I should have a pretty good idea of where this person needs to be on all of these measures. And if I have something that's exaggerated in a really bad direction, it's like just a red flag. And it's kind of like, oh shit, let's go back and see what's going on with this person, because something's wrong here. This is not right. And let me go about trying to normalize this thing if I can. So where I'm getting to with this is, hey, for and I haven't worked with hurdlers. So it's really like impossible for me to be like, oh yeah, every hurdler should have a tremendous amount, if their right leg leads over the hurdle and their left leg is their trail leg, they should have this, dramatically more left hip external rotation compared to right. I don't know, but it like maybe not. I don't really know. Is making them symmetrical a good idea? Maybe not. I don't really know. It probably this is where people just need to measure things and see what the measurements actually show. And if you have like measurements as like, hey, we measured the top 20 100-meter hurdlers in the world, and here's what their table tests were. Hey, look, they all look pretty much the same. You know what I mean? Like now you actually have some idea about what is supposed to be the case for a hurdler,
Right.
and it's probably very different numbers than what you should have if you are a javelin thrower or a shot putter or a high jumper
Very
or
different.
any other thing.
Very different. And the idea is when they're hurling, they have to be aggressive, bringing their leg into that full hip flexion. That's their lead leg, and it's amazing how they can do it because they're basically sprinters with obstacles. So
Right.
that's just as simple as I can get it. Like sprinters with obstacles. They're the fastest humans in the world that also have obstacles in front of them, and they have to like get over them, hurdle over them. And what I did see is that leg that leads, because they have so much power and they do it so repetitively, they have a little bit less hip extension on that lead leg because of the force that they're always trying to bring up. That trail leg has to internally rotate to get around the hurdle, and some of them have a different technique with their arms to be able to get aggressively over and aggressively back down. And I'm hoping like little by little we can even do more studies on that. Like I took measurements on them, and that's kind of like the pattern in the team. I haven't measured other teams, but that's the pattern that we have. But that just brings me into, like, let's say for example, I understand that they have that, and let's say they're gonna have a little bit more of an well, not let's say, because this is what happens. They have a foot pain. Sprinters and hurdlers, for example, they'll have some foot pain, and this can happen with any athlete. But if I have somebody that has foot pain or knee pain, how important is it, this whole new shoe thing and force into the ground, where people are now confused and asking me, hey Lalo, should I wear the flat foot? Should I wear the heels elevated foot shoe? Should I wear orthopedic shoes if I am a sprinter and I have foot pain? How do you take on the shoe conversation that changes the structure or changes anything in training? How do you
So
see that going on?
are we talking about the shoes that they're wearing when they're running? Are we talking about the shoes they're wearing in the weight room?
So
There's shoes that
yeah,
they're
like the way that you would separate that, do you see it as, okay, well, they should have different shoes for different things?
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
And even just training Gen Pop, like should Gen Pop have different shoes for different things? And
yeah, man. I've literally brought people that have come in to work with me that like more of like a pain kind of a person that comes in and like they've heard about me because they know that I'm someone that's in the movement world and I understand a lot of biomechanics things and like, hey, I used to be able to squat, but I feel like I have hip pain, impingement in the front of the hip now, and I can't get to depth, and on and on and on and on and on. And it's kind of like, all right, well, let's take a look at the easiest possible fixes first. And oftentimes shoes are an example of like an easy fix. And so I'll literally go to a shoe store with someone in New York, and even with like the little plastic things, the little ring that keeps them together, it's kind of like, hey, we're going to put on all the different shoes, and I'm going to watch you squat in the shoe store. And whichever shoe gives you the best response, cool. And I've seen this done in clinics as well, where it's like, we're going to do your table tests and we're going to just change your shoes and we're going to see which shoe gives you the best table tests, and so it's easy from that standpoint. People generally need shoes. Like when I think about a bad shoe versus a good shoe, a bad shoe has a solid heel cup. You know what I mean? Like if you go to the back end of the shoe and you push down, I've got a shoe right next to me, so I can use it as an example. The back end of the shoe right here, if you push down on it, it shouldn't crush. If it crushes, it's a garbage shoe. Okay. Then when you look at where does the shoe flex, the shoe should flex in like where the toe box meets the rest of the shoe. If
right,
it flexes in the middle of the shoe, it's a garbage shoe.
right,
Okay. And then the last piece is when you put your foot in the shoe, do you feel the medial arch of the shoe pushing back into the medial arch of your foot?
which is the
So,
inside of the foot.
yeah, exactly. So those are the three things that you look for in terms of a regular shoe or a cross training shoe or something like that. Now with track spikes, there's basically no heel to it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you just buy good track spikes that are specific to the sport. Like,
Okay.
but if you're, you're not going to have track athletes not running spikes. Like that's what they do. That's the, but from a weight room shoe or a training shoe, those are the three things that you look for. And also if you're just looking for like, what sneakers should I wear during regular life? Same thing. Okay. So,
Right.
I generally speaking, and I utilize table tests. It's kind of like if I take a shoe like this, which is a decent shoe, this is the Under Armour Tri-Base 3, and I put this on like, let's say I have somebody, because I'll just go and make it simple. Like every time I see someone come in with a Barefoot shoe, I'm like, oh, here we go again. You know what I mean? They heard some information and like
Right.
they've taken it here and like, I'll never see good measurements happen when someone's wearing a Barefoot shoe. Okay. Then I'll put a decent shoe on them. And literally that's it. Like, it's just like, let's take that shoe off. Let's put this shoe on. And I see their table tests improve pretty drastically from a range of motion standpoint.
Why do you think that happens?
Well, it's because the human foot is designed to interact with natural earth. And natural earth has a constantly changing terrain pattern to it. It's not level typically. So the human foot is made to kind of like pronate and supinate all the time, evert and invert at the ankle. It's meant to plantar flex and dorsiflex. And it's meant to have those things constantly changing. And for the nerve endings of the foot and the ankle to constantly be getting this information and communicating it back and forth with the central nervous system so that it learns how to be adaptable and variable and all that kind of stuff. And, quite honestly, there's probably nothing more confusing for a human foot brain combination than an artificially created flat ground. Okay. But,
Right.
What's interesting is that a good shoe is not a flat ground. It's actually an uneven ground when you think about it,
Right.
because it's got a rounded arch support. It's got a heel cup that goes inside of it. So a barefoot shoe on a artificially flat ground is the most confusing thing that you could put, like, for a foot communicating with the nervous system.
Right.
So it's good in theory because it's like, hey, we're meant to be barefoot and we're meant to interact with the ground, but we're not meant to interact with a fake ground that we've created, So at the very least, build yourself some like variable terrain by having a shoe that actually has a heel cup and an arch support.
Right.
Like, as crazy as it sounds, it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's a more normalized ground for your foot to interact with than a barefoot shoe on a flat artificial surface.
Right. And then some of the pros that I have, they can train on anything. Like, you give them Crocs, and these guys are gonna just do whatever. Like, their foot, it's almost like the foot is stronger than the shoe, right? But sometimes what I do in variability, because I'm not gonna complicate their life with like trying to find the best shoe, they're in and out. What I want them to do is just, hey, today no shoes. We're gonna do heel elevated and just have your feet on the wedge. Like, just squat there, whatever, and then move on to maybe some days with shoes and then maybe some days without shoes. But it's more like the more we varied that concept, the better they felt about what they were doing, which was better for them at the track. It wasn't so much like, oh, I complicated myself by I left the shoes over here, I dropped the shoe, I don't know which one to buy, you got to come with me. When it's 23 athletes that I got to go, it was like, so it was like, can I give them the right things to win? And do you think that for a Gen Pop, if they have the time and all that, just a regular shoe would work, something for cross training that is a popular Reebok or an Under Armour shoe would be good for cross training? If they wanted to lift, would you recommend them a heel elevated?
Well, most shoes have a heel that's higher than the toes.
Yeah.
I would just say that you judge a shoe by whether or not the calcaneus, or the heel cup, if the back of the shoe crushes, it's a garbage shoe. Don't buy it. Okay. Right. If it bends and flexes in the middle of the shoe rather than where the toe box meets the midfoot, it's a garbage shoe. Okay. Right. And if you can't feel the arch on the inside of the shoe, it's a garbage shoe. Don't buy it. So you got those three things, and it has to hit all three of those things. And if it hits all three of those things, good. If it doesn't, because I'm telling you right now, like, Bill Hartman did a whole shoe review series and like really chronicled all the problems with most shoes. And there's very few shoes that are like actually good shoes from a performance standpoint.
Right.
The shoe that won his contest was the Under Armour Tri-Base Range shoe. And, that usually works for most people as a shoe recommendation. Right. It's the one I've got. I wear those things pretty much exclusively, but I do believe that generally speaking, you should wear the proper equipment for the task that you're doing. If I was competing in strongman, I would be wearing, I would get an appropriate belt when it comes to a deadlift event. I would have, for instance, with like any truck pull or any event where you have to pull an object, you better have rock climbing shoes or you're going to lose the event.
Yeah.
You're going to slide, you're going to slip, you might be the strongest person there, but you're going to lose because you don't have the right equipment. If you're,
if you games. So
if you have to squat, then you better have a weightlifting shoe with, a heel support in it, or you're going to lose. Right. You know what I mean? So I generally speaking say if two good pieces of advice I've gotten, always have the right shoes and always have a good bed with a solid mattress. Because if you take care of your feet and you sleep well, man, I'll tell you, man, as somebody with competing in mixed martial arts back in the day, that tore my toes up. And I've had toe pain for 20 something years now. And it's on days where it's not so bad, I perform like a rock star. On days where it's really bad, I feel like I can't do anything and I don't want to do anything. Yeah. So take care of your feet and take care of your sleep. And a mattress and good pairs of shoes go a long way for that. And it's simple fixes. I'm not talking about people going out and buying, Gucci shoes for $3,000 or something like that. It's like, hey, these are probably $120 shoes. It's like, if you have $1 million body, this is a 2-cent investment. Like, don't be cheap about your feet and don't be cheap about your sleep. Yeah. And those two things will go a long way for you.
I remember at the beginning, to not trail too long on there, but I remember on the beginning of Athletic Weapon, we talked about plantar fasciitis and according to shoe. And one of the things you automatically said was like, yes, shoes are important. Yes, mechanics are important, but also your body weight. So if your body weight goes up, and because you're propelling yourself through space, if your body weight goes up, it's going to automatically add volume to the way that you use those shoes that you think were the best shoes. So, and
it'll point it out real fast.
So yeah, that got real quick. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna hit you with some IG fire chat questions. Just real quick, I'll throw you a question and you just give me the easiest answer, and I'll give you the idea of where it's coming from. So this is a bodybuilding pro, IFBB pro woman that asks, how do I train pro bodybuilding without causing muscular imbalances that may cause me an injury?
Oh, I mean, that's interesting. I think you have to do some kind of unilateral training and see whether or not like the two sides are functioning similarly, both from like an output standpoint and a feel standpoint. Like, yesterday for me, for instance, I had single leg deadlifts in the program. And I mean, I remember getting done and I was talking to Seth, who I was training with, my buddy, and I was like, man, it feels like two completely different exercises for me. Like my left leg feels like it's like all glute and the right leg feels like it's all hamstrings. Like it's weird. Like, and I would just say, generally speaking, like when you're in the extremes of a program, you're going to notice that you're going to probably become a little bit more imbalanced. Like it's just like stress will shift you into your compensatory patterns. And so I don't even know if that's a bad thing. That if you're a pro bodybuilder and you're going to literally be evaluated on every tiny little thing, then yeah, it's kind of like you probably have to make sure that these tiny details of symmetry are really accounted for. And so you might have to do like more reps on one side of your body than the other. If you have like, hey, my left rear delts are garbage and my right rear delts are okay. Like, well, shit, you might have to do some more unilateral, just left rear delt work compared to right. And maybe prioritize, like, this is the other piece I'd say, like, probably a little bit more volume for the lagging side, and then prioritize it. So you put it in the beginning of the workout during really critical periods, because the research on that shows that whatever you do first in a training session gets the most in terms of the adaptations that take place. So for advanced athletes, it's kind of like, hey, what's the thing that's holding you back? Well, oddly enough, my left rear delts are garbage. Well, do them first. Just do like at the start of every workout, do 3 sets of isolated left rear delt work. And that should be I can't think of any other way that would make sense with research and everything else to actually target and promote that.
Yeah, I will throw in there, like, sometimes bodybuilders will put a lot of volume. Let's say, for example, we do chest. We'll do a lot of chest exercises. I remember Mike Israetel said also something like, you don't want to be fixed on a bar after you fatigue the chest too much, like later on in the exercises, because you might just be bench pressing mostly tricep and shoulders.
Yeah.
So you want to get dumbbells that have a little bit more, and then maybe when you're tired, that hopefully, so unilateral work on that. Yeah.
And you can also just dominate it with just one side. It's like, hey, you're just right side dominating it. Like, you see that a lot with people squatting, where it's like, man, I don't know, they were probably 75% right leg, 25% left leg in terms of what actually moved it.
Yeah.
So
you squat sideways.
yeah. So like I really like the Kaiser single leg press, because you can't hide from it. It gives you power numbers. It gives you, you just do one leg at a time. It's pretty. So I think some level of unilateral work, and then prioritization, and just different levels of volume for the two sides oftentimes.
Awesome. What about the long femur? People are, now the debate is, well, people with long femurs can't squat right, or they might not squat the best. What do you think on that?
I just think it's another excuse that people are using to take them away from, like, so when I see people not squat well, it's usually, there's 2 things that jump out to me. One is that it's too heavy, which is the easiest, most obvious thing imaginable. And 2 is that it's a bad position of where the load was put. Like, it's almost like there's still this culture out there that's like, the only way to squat is a barbell back squat, which makes no sense. You know what I mean? If you put the load in front of the person in some way, shape, or form, it generally speaking causes them to shift. People don't squat well when their weight falls too far forward. So if I put the weight in front of you, you'll immediately see someone shift their weight back in response to that. Okay. And so I would just think, like, the easiest way is to see this to be done right. Give them a little bit of heel elevation, put the weight in front of them, and don't make the weight too heavy. And I guarantee you'll probably see that person with long femurs just move straight up and down and look pretty normal with a squat. If you want to see a bad squat, put too much weight on them, put it on their back, and put them on a flat surface.
Yeah, none of the hurdlers and sprinters, since they're already pushed forward, none of them were doing heavy back squats.
Yeah.
I immediately got a bunch of lower back pain. I immediately got a bunch of not strong enough. So it was just like, let's do front squats. Let's do, the SSB bar. Let's just do safety bar squat. Like, just things that push them back, because they already push themselves forward the whole time.
Yeah.
I love that. That's perfect. Next question is, what if I work out? This is a Gen Pop client. What if I work out and I don't get sore? Is not getting sore, I guess, the question. Is it good?
Well,
is it okay?
Are you, like, who cares about getting sore or not? Like, are you getting stronger? Are you moving towards your goals? There's some, I will say this, like, at a certain point, I don't know anybody like if someone's goals are working out and building muscle mass, like anyone that I know that is big, has a lot of muscle mass, they're usually pretty sore. Okay. Like, and why are they sore? Even if they're using the same exercises, because a lot of times soreness is just related to novelty, and a lot of volume of novelty, generally speaking, will get people sore. And a lot of eccentric stress will get people sore. You know, it's like, is it new? Did you do a lot of something new? And did you have to eat a lot of eccentrics on it? That'll make you more sore than anything. But it's kind of like, well, that's not necessarily the evaluation of whether or not something's quality. So I'm torn on this one, because it's almost like everybody I know that's like a legit bodybuilder is pretty much sore all the time. You know what I mean? Right. It's like they're operating on some level of baseline soreness.
What would be too much?
Yeah, like for sure. But at the same time, it's like after every leg day, they're kind of like, oh shit, I feel like I got hit by a truck. So these people are also usually pretty damn strong. You know what I mean? Right. It's like they're still moving really impressive weights for every exercise that they're doing. They're doing it with really good technique. They're controlling the lowering phase. And guess what? They're creating a tremendous amount of volume. You know what I mean? Like, I understand not everybody has the time to do this stuff. I had 3 hours of legs yesterday. You know, I did 46 sets of legs yesterday. And I'm sore as hell today. Now, I don't do that year round, but I'm in week 17 of a 22-week program. The volume increases as I go through the training block. And it's pretty disgusting training volume right now. So I'm like, you know, I would challenge any human alive to do what I did yesterday and not be sore. There's no way that you're not going to be sore. It's impossible.
What would be too much soreness though? Where would you cut it off?
When your numbers start going in the wrong direction. You know what I mean? Like
if you didn't, like, what about if you couldn't train tomorrow or today because yesterday was so grueling? Would that also be like detrimental?
No, not necessarily. Like I don't have to do legs again until Friday. You know what I mean? I do legs on Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. And guess what? It's my numbers keep going up across the block. You know what I mean? And if my numbers started to go down, if all of a sudden, you know, like right now I've got the front loaded safety squat bar for a squat. And since the beginning of this thing, the numbers have just gone up in terms of load and reps relative to this, you know, the number of sets that I'm doing.
Right.
Continuously. Boom. And it's like, well, I guess I'm not that fatigued because my numbers keep going up. I'm adapting and I'm becoming more fit. And hey, if all of a sudden my numbers decreased by 50 pounds, like that, which I could normally do, I'm like, I can't even move this thing. And I had to drop 50 pounds down to get the same number of reps. Now I can say I'm actually fatigued.
Right.
Okay. That hasn't happened. It has not happened. And like, yeah, right now it's a disgusting amount of volume. I have 225 working sets of resistance training this week.
Wow.
So yeah. And like next week I'll have 237 sets.
But it didn't start like that. I remember we started with 2 sets each day of each exercise.
Yep.
Right.
So it just volume increases as a training block increases.
Right.
And it can get to some really ugly places. And if you progress appropriately, human beings are capable of doing ridiculous things. You got to start in the right place and then you numerically increase the right level.
Right.
But look, man, like, you know, I would say it might be a situation where this person is doing the same thing now from a numbers standpoint that they were doing a year ago.
Right.
Like you've got to progress, you know what I mean? But I'm telling you, if you do 46 sets of legs and every set goes to within proximity of failure, you're going to wake up the next day and you're going to feel like you got hit by a truck. Right. And as long as the things are going in the right direction, cool, you're doing a good job. I've gained 21 pounds across 17 weeks in this block, and my numbers have gone through the roof. You know what I mean? Like in week 1, I was front squatting 245 for sets of 10. You know, by week 15, I was front squatting 315 for sets of 12. You know, like that's progress. That's demonstrable progress.
That's quantifiable progress.
Yeah.
That's perfect. So this person that is not getting sore, essentially, they need to work harder. That can be
maybe I don't know. This person might also be like, yeah, well, I gained 40 pounds of muscle, right, and I took my front squat from 215 to 575, and I'm like, amazing. Like, tell me your program. But I guarantee, chances are that this person is doing the same thing that they were doing previously. Their body weight probably hasn't changed. Their sets and reps probably are the same that they were 3 years ago. I see most people that you see at the gym. It's like, man, I've been seeing this guy for 3 years. He looks exactly the same. He's still squatting 185 for 3 sets of 10. He's doing the exact same thing I saw 3 years ago. Like most people are doing the exact same thing, look exactly the same. Nothing ever changes. They're never progressing anything. And it's like, you know, that's the norm to me.
So the answer would be, all right, well, we need to track it. If you're getting better, then it's fine. Soreness wouldn't have to do a lot with it. But usually the data shows if you're getting better, you're going to, you know, that some of that is going to leak into the fact that you're getting sore. It's going to show.
Yeah. I mean, look, like it's like, I'm not saying that soreness is the goal. Soreness is a side effect.
Right.
You know, but at the same time, I literally don't know anyone that's a monster. Never met a single person where I'm like, this dude or this girl is an absolute savage that isn't sore.
Right. Got it. All right. What about the stomach vacuum? What does that do? Does it do anything?
I mean, it's important for bodybuilders. They have to be able to do that on stage, right? That's like part of like their posing and things that they're associated with sports performance for them. I guess if you can't do it, it would mean that your transversus wasn't working, and that's probably not good. But I've never coached anyone in my entire life to vacuum in their stomach at any point during any exercise.
And you never needed it, right?
No, it's like, it's just kind of like a draw in is really weird.
Got it.
Like, you know,
what about glute bands? Do you ever have anybody use glute bands or tube bands?
I do, but not for the reasons that most people would use them for.
So,
you know,
what reasons do you use them for?
I use them for a placeholder. So for instance, if someone is squatting and I want their femurs to stay right over their feet and not go out or in, I might use a band. Okay. Primarily actually for like, I mean, it's just that's basically it. Like, I don't want them to actively try to stretch it outwards, and I don't want it to actively fall down. I just want it to, I want it to stay exactly the same. So not even RNT. I'm not even using it for RNT. I'm literally just like, hey, I want you to feel this thing as a point of reference, and I don't want it to change.
Okay.
You know, it's when
use them for opening up their knees, right? More motivation.
Yeah, I'm not looking for that. You know, I'm just looking for everything to stay exactly the same. I don't want them to push outwards into it. It's literally just a placeholder, something that they can feel that gives them some level of feedback.
Got it.
If it begins to feel like it's pushing in more on them or stretching more, it's like, hey, you see how you can't prevent your legs from going out? Like, that's not good. I don't want this thing to stretch.
Right. Okay. Are muscles ever turned off and people need to turn them on?
Almost never. You know, this idea about like, hey, you've got glute amnesia or something like that. Like, it's just like physical therapy, like jargon, lingo, garbage that's so outdated and ridiculous. You know, it's just crazy. It's like, and you'll hear it like, hey, this person squats 500 pounds and the physical therapist told them that their glutes aren't working. It's
Right.
like, I'm there's no way that that's the pot that this person who runs like a, a 10-200 and squats 500 pounds. Yeah, they just got told by the physical therapist that their glutes are not working. Like,
Turned off.
there's no way. There's no way. Like, get rid of this physical therapist. You gotta like kick them out, man. Like, they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Like, it's like the physical therapist gives them a weird test or exercise that they've never done before. Okay. And then the physical therapist is like looking for something very specific that, oh, this glute didn't like fire in the right sequence or time. Well, imagine that you've never done something before. Okay. Imagine like you're from Africa and you've never hit a hockey puck. Do you think that the way that you'd hit the slap shot would look good, or that you'd use the right muscles? No, you have to learn how to do it. You know what I mean? And a lot of these weird physical therapy tests are literally just like, hey, here's this random task that somebody says is a test. Okay. And if you can't do this thing, there's something wrong with you. And it's like, the person's never done this physical activity that you're asking them to do. They
Right.
don't know what you're talking about. They haven't learned it. And now you're telling them that something's wrong with them because they don't know how to do this thing that they don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's this insane thing. You know what I mean? It's very task specific. And if you don't know how to do a task, you're usually bad at it. And that goes across the board for anything. Hey, I don't know how to change the batteries in this food scale. I'm like, you're picking at it, you don't do it right. And then like someone's like, oh no, you just slide it like this. Use your thumb. And then you're like, oh, okay. And then you learn the trick to it, and then you practice it a few times and you get better at it.
Right.
So that's usually what I think about a lot of that stuff. But it's kind of like, there is the possibility that it's good to strengthen certain muscles in certain positions. And if someone hasn't spent any time doing that, they might get benefit from getting a muscle stronger in a certain position.
Right.
And that's just called training. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
Plain and simple,
Yeah, they usually put these structural things where it's like, the kinesthesia of you having to be connected through one thing and then the next thing and then the next thing. But what you're saying is like, well, some people after they've had the thing, they'll put it together and they'll have a feed forward in the mechanism as far as neurologically to feel like I know what's coming, so I know what to do. But I didn't know what was coming, so I didn't know what to put together,
That's literally it. Yeah. Right. That's it. Right. You gave them a random new task that they didn't know how to do. And guess what? They didn't do it the way that you were told is the appropriate way for this thing to have happen.
Right. Okay.
Not surprising.
No, it's nothing new. I remember my son tries to trash talk me when we play basketball, and he's 12, so he says, "Bro, you're trash," and I'm like, "All right, let's play 21." And then he sees like, "Oh, I'm trash. I get it. Like I see where it is, So I understand that from that point of view of like you've never done it, if you've never played at that level, you've never had to do this with that much effort, so the body's not gonna react with what it needs because it doesn't know how.
Just novelty. Yeah.
Right. So
I've never met anyone that's good at something they've never done before.
Exactly. Well, and then what I show my son is he plays basketball, but he doesn't play at that level. He's not as tall, and he can't fix some of those things. So he's gonna have to, react in a different way. So get lower to the ground, learn how to handle the ball versus me being taller and just like putting my hand over you. Was like, sorry, that's my advantage,
Right.
So,
yeah.
So it's like, we have two more questions. It's just leading right into. I don't want to take too much of the time. I know we're at the hour. Before the last one, hernias and deadlifting. Do you have any experience with that? How do you see that? How do you look at hernias and deadlifting? Because that's like a big no-no. I'm against it. I think I'm not against deadlifting. I'm against telling people no versus like, hey, why don't you just do it and let's see how we can progress from there. Because our
are we talking about someone that has a hernia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a person that has two herniated discs.
I thought you meant like a abdominal or inguinal hernia. Okay.
No, disc herniations. One is a bulging disc, L3, L4, and then L5, S1 would be the ruptured disc.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, the like disc based injuries and things like that. Um, like it's one of the biggest red herrings in the history of pain stuff. You know, um, even in the 90s, like the research isn't new anymore. In Italy back in the 90s, they started all this MRI research, and they took people with no back pain whatsoever, and they just threw thousands of these people into MRI machines, and they just saw what they saw. And like if you're over 35, you've got an 85% chance that you have at least one bulging or herniated disc in your lumbar spine. And these are people that have no back pain. Okay. And many of these people had more than one. Okay. So just because you have some disc image that shows that it's like protruding a little bit, it's kind of meaningless. It doesn't actually tell me anything about whether or not something hurts. Like I guarantee there's probably no way that I don't have every single one of my discs herniated or bulging or something along those lines. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't have any back pain,
Right.
you know, like not currently. I think that for the most part, it's probably very non-specific in terms of like physical tasks that you can and can't do. I just think of like, if you don't deadlift well, something probably hurts. And if you use really bad program design, something probably hurts.
Yeah.
So it's
The idea what I've seen is from this person, the what physical therapists have told her is don't deadlift, and some will
yeah,
say, yeah, go ahead, just do it safely, and I go over it. Her hips are inhaled pelvis, so
yep,
the abdominals are just protrude out.
yep,
Her femurs are facing more outwards. They blame it on her genetics, or that's the way she was built. But we've been doing more, like, for example, unilateral deadlifts, contralateral loaded. That
yeah,
has been very helpful. And then I've said, okay, this is fine. We can stay here, work the hamstring. You don't have to deadlift heavy. You don't
yeah.
have to deadlift bilaterally heavy
Mm-hmm.
unless it doesn't hurt. But if that's your normal bias as far as your body, then we work around it. Is that
Yeah.
what that's what I've learned from rethinking the big patterns is, well, there's many different ways we can go about an exercise.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think that the research on muscle hypertrophy is super useful because it shows that you can get an equal hypertrophy response with loads anywhere between 30% and 85% of your one rep max. So the thing that tends to cause more people pain than anything is just when things are too heavy. You know what I mean? Like, so 30% of your one rep max is pretty friggin' light. Okay. And you can get just as good a muscular response with that weight as you can with 85%. You just have to work to within proximity of failure.
So
Okay.
you have to have a feeling of fatigue at some point where it's really burning a lot, or you feel
Or
it,
you
you feel
just, yeah,
tired.
you literally just can't do any more reps. You know what I mean? And so when people have some previous history of pain, like I'm going to skew them more towards like lighter, more reps. But it's like, hey, you don't get to just stop because you want to stop. Like you have to like actually work to the point where you almost fail. Like you still have to like eat shit here and go really far. You might have to do 40 reps with this thing. But load is usually the thing that gets more people in trouble than anything else.
I agree.
So, the more that I can limit load and just still get all the responses that I'm looking for, I'm super happy with that.
Right. I remember from rethinking the big patterns, the big thing that I understood was the concept of dosaging. So if we go high volume, or we go high velocity, or we go high duration, those are the things that are going to get more dangerous due through what I've learned from you of Jacksonian dissolution, and the fact that
Yep.
your tissues might not be ready for that kind of stuff. Like I'll take a baseball player, for example, that I took him to the track and I said, well, we're going to, do acceleration drills. We're going to do our mock drills and all that. And when he started getting into acceleration into top speed, that's it. He blew his hamstring. And it was like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, well, I can clearly see that you're overstriding some of the things that you're not used to. So,
Yep.
but also your body is not ready for top speed. Usually
Right.
in baseball, it's a shorter distance. you probably need to get low to the ground because you're going to throw yourself or anything like that. So you're not going to go at a top speed of a sprinter. So when we go to the track, we just need to relearn the pattern for that one thing and
Yeah,
shorten the distance, you know? So I
for
agree
sure.
with dosaging from you.
Yeah, just graded exposure. You know what I mean? Like if it's day one with someone and it's bench press, like I'm probably not going to have them go to the like absolute failure with something. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
hey, we're just going to get the motion and we're going to stop plenty of reps short of where you're going to fail. Like it's the same thing. It's like, well, like more like you could encounter problems the closer that you go to their limit. So, and it's day one. It's like, we don't need to start crazy on day one. Let's just get the feel for it. And we
Right.
can always build after that. Like it's more like people starting too much, too soon, too fast. And then there's nowhere to go. I'm always looking at like, let's start with the least that we can possibly do that still gives you some response. And that gives me this really big runway to progress you into. And I want you to continue to make progress as long as you possibly can. So it's very similar with running. It's kind of like you got a couple of options. One is you just start them with shorter distances because they can't get up to top speed, you know, and or two, you actually just talk to them and you're like, listen, I do not need you to run full speed. Okay.
Right.
Like we just, if you run as fast as you possibly can, I'm going to be really angry at you. You did the thing wrong. I only want you to run at 85% or 80% of your top speed today. It's day one. Just coast, make it easy. Like,
Right.
please do
Because
not. Yeah.
this guy, he does sprints on the regular, and he's a trainer, and we're going over some of these concepts, and I'm telling him, like, I know you always injure the same hamstring. It's probably not because your glutes are turned off. It's
Right.
probably not because you have a problem there. It's just, it could be muscular behavior. You always deadlift thinking that will transfer into sprinting, and sprinting is a high velocity. It doesn't have to be high volume for it to be an injury response. So high
Yeah.
velocity is also a more volume way. That's why the dosaging was very important in the movement quantity. So I really appreciate that. And the last question, and I'm leaving it for last because I know that this one's just like the one, right? Everybody's following. Usually they'll see you and they'll see me and they'll correlate the fact that we always kind of make fun of like BOSU ball and balance training.
Mm-hmm.
You've gotten away from that, but I've always kept it since my beginning because I used to squat. I used to post videos squatting on BOSU balls and all these things, but I see BOSU balls in a highly proprioceptive environment. I'll say it like that because in physical therapy, they usually use it for feeling the muscles that they're trying to, like the quad muscle or the VMO and things like that. But I don't see the benefits in training, and that's just my personal
Yeah.
way of looking at it. We've spoken about this, but I want you to give like the rationale on why you don't have to squat on a BOSU ball to get a response of getting better at the gym.
Well, BOSU ball just makes absolutely no sense on any level. You know what I mean? Like it's if you're training on a BOSU ball, I would say you're actually not training because every rep is different. Like training is like the purpose of training is to create specific structural and functional adaptations.
Right.
And a functional adaptation means that you can do more of something. You know, like you can squat more weight for your 1 rep max. You can squat more reps with a specific weight. You can bench press more weight. You can run faster. You can jump higher. Like, and the only way that you accomplish those things is through training. You know what I mean? And training is this sequential increase in load and volume over time. So how do you know that you're increasing? Like, but if I'm going to increase load and volume over time, the exercises have to be standardized. If, like with a BOSU ball, literally every rep is different because the ground is constantly changing underneath my feet. So nothing is ever the same. Like if training is keeping as many things the same as you possibly can and
Right.
manipulating one variable at a time. So you kind of brought up like in physical therapy or rehabilitation settings, oftentimes in the very beginning, post-injury or post-operation, you'll see unstable surfaces used. And that's because injured tissue has a decreased neurological feedback. It's sending messages slowly and not enough back to the nervous system. The afferent information is depressed. Okay, so if I put you on an unstable surface, it tends to speed up the afferent messages going back to the nervous system, back to the central nervous system. And that's beneficial. Like, you're just kind of kick-starting this process of afferent information going back. But once it's back to normal, you should take away the unstable surface permanently. Like, right. It makes no sense. Like, somehow in people's minds, they've created this bad math equation of unstable person plus unstable surface equals more stability. And that makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. Like, if I've got someone that's unstable, I wouldn't put them on ice and have them try to run, thinking that that's going to make them a more stable runner. You know, I'm using words I don't even like. Like, stability to me is a garbage word. It doesn't mean anything. But I'm trying to speak the lingo of people that use that word a lot.
Right.
So if I want to, like, training is about classical movements that are done properly, that you see the person make progress in over time. Like, I have no idea if you're making, and here's the thing, people trick you into thinking that they're making progress all the time. But I want to know that you're making progress. Like, I don't trust anybody. You know, it's kind of like, hey, look, I progressed my squat, my 10 rep max. I increased the weight by 50 pounds over 8 weeks. Right. And I'm like, did you, or did you just decrease the range of motion on your squat? Because I've seen that happen a million times. It's like, right. People get rewarded by thinking that they're making progress, and their progress is based on load. You know what I mean? And they're not measuring anything but load. And I'm like, I don't know if it's the same squat. I don't know if your week 1 squat range of motion is the same as your week 8 range of motion squat. I bet you increase the weight, but I bet you decrease the range of motion. And I bet you really haven't made that much progress in all actuality. Like, if that's and so I'm looking to compare apples to apples and then have more apples over time. And I don't trust that people are actually, I'm like, I think you got a couple of bananas in there and some pears. I don't know if you really have been collecting only apples. I don't believe you for a second. And so I try to use as many tools and instruments as I possibly can to actually, like, check for apples. You know, are you actually, do you have more apples, or did you just throw some plums in there? You know? So, but that's the point to me, is it's like, but to me, I'm always like, well, think about it. How many people actually look and perform differently as a result of their training? Very few. Like, when you're really being honest about it, how many people really get in there and it's like, on week 1, they, you know, were 175 pounds at 12% body fat and could bench press 215 pounds for 5 repetitions. And by month 6, they're 205 pounds at 8% body fat, and they bench press, you know, 275 pounds for 10 repetitions. Wow. Like, it's very uncommon. You know what I mean? And I'm like, but people will say that they're making progress, or like, and it's like, if you were actually making progress, you would be a different animal. You know what I mean? But I don't think you are. I think you're deluding yourself into thinking you're making progress.
Now, what about the argument of, like, because, you know, I've also hung kettlebells on the bars and the bench press and the squat, because it's like, you know, I got to feel what's happening here in this world of enter training, right? So I gotta figure it out. Like, what are they feeling? What are they doing? And the argument that they have is, because I don't do this anymore, but the argument that they have is stabilizer muscles.
Yeah.
How would you approach that? Like, if the argument is that, like, well, I'm working my stabilizer muscles. If I'm benching with kettlebells hanging from the bar, that'll stabilize, quote unquote, stabilize. Again, sorry for the word stabilize, but
yeah, no, it's fine. I understand what you're going
the
for.
shoulder, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like, Yeah, again, it's kind of utilizing like an early stage physical therapy method for afferent information when hopefully that's not necessary. Like if you have to continue to resort to that, it tells me that there's really probably just giant problems with your program design or the execution of your exercises. Like I don't have time with most people to go with exercises like that because there's so many other things that I need to do to increase fitness. And there's not enough time to work with them to do that stuff. So, I just see it as like, why do you have shoulder pain? This is to me either bad program design or you're not executing your sets appropriately. Are you actually following the number recommendations? Are you utilizing good technique? Are the reps being consistent? Are you stopping when you should stop your set? Or are now you like kind of going too far? You know what I mean? Like, are you twisting and turning to get your reps? Like, why? Like, so when people have a disciplined approach and they follow a good program design, they're usually just making progress and not experiencing pain problems, But the big rocks that I see problems with is it's like there's illogical program design. The person isn't following a consistent approach. The way that they start doing their sets is garbage. It just falls apart. The reps look different by the end of the set compared to the beginning of the set. And that's just to me like just a lack of discipline. Right. And when people have a disciplined scientific approach, they're usually fine and they use basic exercises and you can witness progressive overload take place in a manner that's appropriate. And then you don't need to do all these like Band-Aid fixes for things that shouldn't need them. And that probably don't provide that much of a fix anyways.
Right. We have the data that, it also dampens force production. It doesn't allow you to move as fast as you could or as strong as you could. And you talked about it once where it was like, well, if I'm unstable, I'm not going to use my max strength because I can fall. So why would my brain tell me to use max production even though you might fall? It's like that's not logical in any sense of
yeah, man. Like even if I'm I don't know how to ice skate, okay? And if somebody puts me out on an ice rink, do you think I'm going to try to pick another human being up? No, I'm going to hold on to the damn hockey boards on the side to try to lighten myself because I can't deal with my own body weight.
Yeah.
Because it's not a surface that I know how to interact with appropriately. It's too difficult for me. So it's going to be a similar thing. Like there's, the reason that your shoulders feel better when you do that kind of approach probably is because you're just not doing anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
I agree. And it goes back to everything you said, especially the part to me, what unlocks it is just, you're using a beginner thing for an advanced thing, and that's not how it works. So I think, I'm done with the questions, but I think that the people should, and everyone, it could be anyone and everyone, they should buy your book and they should go over the Rethinking the Big Patterns idea on how you were able to, separate and put together concepts that just allowed human beings to say, okay, I'm going to cook this meal. This athlete is a soup. This athlete is a sandwich. I'm going to need bread for this one. I don't need bread for this one. I might need ham for this one, but the soup doesn't have any ham, so I'm not going to put that in. And then the dosaging of each one of those things that need to be in there, like I'm not going to put, a banana in the soup because that doesn't go with the flavors that I'm trying to get and things like that. That's how I try to explain Rethinking the Big Patterns in the overall. It's like you need to know how to cook the meals, but if you don't understand where you're getting, you have the recipe, but if you don't understand what each one of those things are and what they do, you're not going to be able to make the plate happen. So I want to thank you very much for your time, and anything else that you want to talk about and how they can find more information, because people watching this would be Gen Pop that like to watch a lot of YouTube videos and like to learn a lot about fitness.
Yeah.
So they want more information. That's generally the people that follow me. So where can they find more of you and what you do?
Yeah, probably the easiest one-stop shop is my Instagram, which is at Dr. Pat Davidson, Dr. Pat Davidson. And then it's got the bio link with the link tree that has like everything that I do. in there. Which I feel like some people don't know how to use Linktree, or like the fact that like the bio link, you go to
They
the
do.
main,
They do. No, they do. And if they don't, they'll figure it out. Just tell them,
yeah,
look, there's a link in the bio. Do that. You know?
yeah, just go there and it takes you to everything that I've like pretty much ever done. So yeah, I mean, I have a lot of different products. I've got kind of like my business is divided into two primary trees where I've got education products and I've got training products. And the training products are Athletic Weapon, which is an ongoing online training program. And the other ones are that I've written 2 training books in the past, Mass and Mass 2. And then the education products are, I have the Power Hour, which is I've been doing this once a week for 4 years plus. It's a 1 hour education session that I do, and I go around to different gyms in the New York City area, and people ask questions. I try to answer their questions and do exercise demos and things like that. And then I also have the Rethinking the Big Patterns certification seminar information stuff. So there's an online seminar with an online quiz, and then there's 3 different in-person seminars. I'll be coming down to Miami, I believe in July or August. I don't remember exactly when that is, but I'll definitely have that South Florida seminar at some point. And then beyond that, I also wrote the book, A Coach's Guide to Optimizing Movement, which is like the entire background set of info for the Rethinking the Big Patterns information. So, there's a whole bunch of like people that are looking for more information. It's a never ending source of information. You'll never get enough.
Yeah, but it applies to everything. Like the reason why I recommend people to get the certification, to read the book, to watch your videos, and it takes time to understand new concepts. Yep. But the reason why is because it can be applied to anything. I can use this program with a pro athlete or a child. Like yep. I can also use this program with a CrossFitter. Right? Like it doesn't matter, because you told us like it doesn't matter what model you're using and what ways you like training. It's just this is just going to facilitate the understanding of why you're doing this type of training and when it doesn't yep. make sense,
Right. I tried to create a gigantic umbrella that captured everything in physical exercise and training under it. And then to provide an explanation of, I like the way you put it in terms of like the ingredients for food, like here's all the potential categories of ingredients that you have available to you. Here they are. Okay. Now that you understand what's available to you, take a look at what you're trying to develop and put the right ingredients into that thing. And now that you've done that, here's how to coach them properly. Here's the rules for the way that the body should work under these circumstances. Follow these rules and that you'll arrive at the right exercise choices for the ingredient for the person that you're working with. And now you just have to follow good program design, which is its own topic. You know what I mean? But right. It's kind of like, it is just a simple like algorithm that just leads you to the appropriate choices and then tells you whether or not the things are being done right.
Right. And there's I go everywhere I go for food. Like if I can get yogurt with my kids, I look at here's the ingredients. The pattern is you get the yogurt, then you get everything else on it, and then you pay for it. Like that's I look at training now that way. Like this is what I'm going to need, like the big rocks, and then I'm going to add a little bit of this, and then I'm going to put it over there. But there's no tomato soup in any of the ingredients in this yep. shop ever, Right. I thank you very much for your time, Doc, and I want to have more of these I want to put together and compile more questions over time that are very common questions, but they do have a lot of depth as far as people getting confused on them. And I want to make sure that I make more of this. But thank you very much for your time. I hope you have an excellent day, and thank you for everybody that's listening. Go check out Dr. Pat and everything that he does.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it, Doc.